An anthology of readings of Almighty God's words. Interpretations of the mysteries of God's words to the entire universe. Chapter 28. People's state is that the less they understand of God's words, the more skeptical they are of God's current means of working. But this has no effect on God's work. When His words reach a certain point, people's hearts will naturally come around. In their lives, everyone fixates upon God's words, and they also begin to yearn for His words. And because of God's continuous exposure, they begin to despise themselves. Yet God has also uttered many of the following type of words. When he has thoroughly grasped all of my words, man's stature is commensurate with my wishes, and his pleas are fruitful, and not in vain or futile. I bless the pleas of mankind that are sincere, those that are not a pretense. In fact, people are incapable of completely grasping God's words. They can merely grasp the surface. God merely uses these words to give them an objective to pursue, to make them feel that God does not do things lightly, but is serious about His work. Only then will they have the faith to pursue. And because all people only plead for their own sakes, not for the will of God, but God does not blow hot and cold, His words have always been directed at man's nature. Although most people today plead, they are not sincere. It is just a pretense. The state of all people is that they consider my mouth to be a cornucopia. All people wish to acquire something from my mouth, whether it be the secrets of state, or the mysteries of heaven, or the dynamics of the spiritual world, or the destination of mankind. Because of their curiosity, people are all willing to search for these things, and do not wish to gain anything of the provision of life from God's words. Thus God says, "Too much is lacking within man. He requires not just nutritional supplements, but more than that. He needs mental support and a spiritual supply." It is the notions in people that have led to the negativity of today, and it is because their physical eyes are too futile that there is no vigor to what they say and do, and they are perfunctory and slapdash in all things. Are these not the conditions of people? Should people not hurry up and rectify this, rather than carrying on as they are? What benefit is there for man in knowing the future? Why do people have a reaction after reading some of God's words, but the remainder of His words have no effect? When God says, for example, "I provide a cure for man's sickness in order that better effects may be achieved, so that all may be restored to health, and so that, thanks to my cure, they may return to normality," how is it that these words have no effect in people? Is everything done by God not that which ought to be attained by man? God has work to do. Why do people not have a path to walk? Is this not running counter to God? There is actually much work that people ought to do. For example, how much do they know of the great red dragon? In the words, "Do you truly hate the great red dragon?" God saying, "Why have I asked you so many times?" shows that people are still ignorant of the nature of the great red dragon, and that they remain incapable of going deeper. Is this not the very work that man ought to do? How can it be said that man has no work? If that were the case, what would be the significance of God's incarnation? Is God acting in a slapdash and perfunctory manner for the sake of going through the motions? Can the great red dragon be defeated in this way? God says, "I have already begun, and I will commence the first step of my work of chastisement in the dwelling place of the great red dragon." These words are directed at the work in divinity. The people of today have already entered chastisement in advance, and thus God says this is the first step of His work. He is not making people endure the chastisement of disasters, but the chastisement of words, because when the tone of God's words changes, people become totally ignorant, and after that they all enter chastisement. Having undergone chastisement, you will formally perform your duty, and will formally praise me throughout the lands, forever and ever. These are steps in God's work. They are His plan. Moreover, these people of God shall personally behold the methods by which the great red dragon is chastised. So catastrophe officially begins outside of them, in the world around them. This is one of the means by which God saves people. Internally they are chastised, and externally catastrophe crashes down. This is to say, God's words are fulfilled. Thus, people would prefer to undergo chastisement over catastrophe, and it is because of this that they remain. On the one hand, this is the point that God's work has come to. On the other, it is so that people may all know God's disposition. Thus God says, "The time when my people enjoy me is when the great red dragon is chastised." Causing the people of the great red dragon to rise up and revolt against it is my plan. And this is the method by which I make perfect my people. And it is a great opportunity for all my people to grow in life. Why is it that God speaks these words, and yet they do not attract people's attention? Countries are in great chaos because God's rod has begun to play its role on earth. God's work can be seen in the state of the earth. When God says, "The waters will roar, the mountains will topple, the great rivers will disintegrate," this is the rod's initial work on earth, with the result that all households upon earth will be torn apart, and all nations on earth will be rent asunder. Gone will be the days of reunions between husband and wife. No more will mother and son meet again. Never again will there be the coming together of father and daughter. All that used to be on earth will be smashed by me. Such will be the general state of families on earth. Naturally, it could not possibly be the state of all of them, but it is the state of most of them. On the other hand, it is referring to the circumstances experienced by the people of this stream in the future. It foretells that once they have undergone the chastisement of words, and the unbelievers have been subjected to catastrophe, there will no longer be familial relations among the people on earth. They will all be the people of Sinim, and will all be faithful in God's kingdom. Thus, gone will be the days of reunions between husband and wife. No more will mother and son meet again. Never again will there be the coming together of father and daughter. And so the families of people on earth will be torn apart, ripped to pieces, and this will be the final work that God does in man. And because God shall spread this work throughout the universe, He takes the opportunity to clarify the word emotion for people, thus allowing them to see that God's will is to tear apart all people's families, and showing that God uses chastisement to resolve all the family disputes among mankind. If not, there would be no way of bringing the final part of God's work on earth to a close. The final part of God's words lays bare mankind's greatest weakness. They all live in emotion, and so God does not avoid a single one of them, and exposes the secrets hidden in the hearts of all mankind. Why is it so hard for people to separate themselves from emotion? Does doing so surpass the standards of conscience? Can conscience accomplish God's will? Can emotion help people through adversity? In God's eyes, emotion is His enemy. Has this not been clearly stated in God's words?